Viva President Ramaphosa, viva! Amandla! Matla! Aruna! Matimba! Aina! All the power! Ya utlwahala. Comrade DSG, who is the program director of this engagement, thank you. Greetings to our President, President Ramaphosa, NEC members who are here with us today, leaders of Alliance Movement, leaders of civil society in all its diversity. Dumela. We are here today, as our DSG has indicated. We're coming to engage. We're coming to debate. But also we're coming here to be solution-oriented. The ANC had its 55th conference, which debated a number of issues. And these issues are developmental issues that you and I, wherever we are, whether you are at the level where you sit in structures, but within your organizations, debate on. These are developmental issues. But the other issue, why you and I are having this conversation, is because we are members of society. Now, these issues can't resolve themselves. They need you and I to connect, of the traditional health practitioners at the national level, the apex that brings together the traditional health practitioners.
The people may have problems, communities may have problems, but what we must equally appreciate is the fact that they also hold solutions to the very same problems that they are confronted with. So our engagement with society, the people, and even at a household level must not only be a one-way, but also positioning the people as part of the solution. There is a seed that has been planted in the idea of the ANC leading a social compact amongst social partners and the society as a whole. We must, though, appreciate the fact that the space of the social compact is not a platform for those who are involved to mount demands against each other. The social compact must be positioned as a platform where, after all is said and done about the solutions that we are raising to the national challenges, when you get into the social compact, you first agree on the national pressing challenges that you want to address. So you transcend sectorial and narrow interests, and your solutions then become national solutions. The social compacting process is not complete until you define what is your own role in the success of that. That is the extent to which we must challenge civil society seated here. We can make practical examples. We have challenges of service delivery, where it was mentioned that, in fact, I'm quoting a caucus and I'm saying it was mentioned. We know that it is a popular scene in communities to see sewage running in streets. We know there are challenges of infrastructure there. But what is equally true is that it is us at an individual and household level who throw foreign objects into the drains and all of that. And we equally have a role to play. And so that is how we would view as social compact, positioning people as part of the solution. Over and above that, poverty in South Africa is very high. There are seeds that we have planted, and there are things that should just never depend on your affordability for you to get those services at the highest quality. Education is one of those, and health is the second amongst others. So it is a progressive government that must do everything to invest in making sure that even the poorest do get those. And lastly, Stivovo, is that we're facing a serious challenge of a potential where the entire generation and the demographic dividend of a benefit who could have benefited or drawn from the investments we should be making in the lives of young people are likely to be lost, be it to drugs and all other things. We want to argue and suggest that we must give meaning to the resolutions that we have taken year in and year out of mobilizing young people for meaningful engagement around the National Youth Service Program. The National Youth Service Program is not an investment that goes for the benefit of young people. The biggest beneficiaries of the National Youth Service is not the young people who are in the program. The biggest beneficiaries of the National Youth Service are those people who are served by the young people who are registered for the National Youth Service Program. We missed a significant opportunity of a cadre of young people who, if they were organized under the National Youth Service during COVID, they would have been mobilized to provide education and awareness even around vaccination, even providing services. Other societies not far from us in SADC use the National Youth Service to position young people to respond to the disasters that they are confronted with. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Let's move to Comrade Gregory.
Thank you very much, Program Director. To the President and the entire leadership that is in the House, a very good afternoon. From the Black Business Council, we want to focus on three issues due to time constraints. I think the first one, President, is that, and colleagues, we do have solutions, and some of the solutions have been proposed. What we do need is to move with speed to make sure that they are implemented. Now, when one looks at an area that concerns us most, which is that of economic transformation, and the role of the state in that, we have already proposed a number of changes to the legislative environment. One of those is the Public Procurement Bill, President, which still remains in the pipeline. If one looks at the proposals that we've put in there, the state has to play a very decisive role in ensuring that this economy is transformed. We cannot have a situation where the majority of the people remain on the sidelines of this economy. and we behave as if we are just, beneficiaries of those that are in control of the economy. The president has already spoken about the empowerment of women, for instance, that state procurement must ensure that 40% of the state spend must go to women. But President, when we sit with the officials at the National Treasury, when we sit with the officials across government, the issue is there is no legislative tool to make that happen. So we need to move with speed to make sure that policies are in place to empower our people. Our youth are a serious concern for us. We cannot have a youth that is not economically engaged. And when you look at, again, the policies that we have, we must move with speed to ensure that those set-asides that we have for youth are actually implemented. And most importantly, that our government must take a risk on our youth. Let's understand that. Our government must take a risk on our youth. Let me make an example, colleagues. Right now, we all know that solar is a big thing. But we are importing everything: inverters, batteries, solar panels. If a youth has to go to the IDC today and say, I need money to produce and manufacture batteries here, that youth will be asked for an offtake. Where is the youth going to take an offtake from? But we know that we are spending money as households, governments, and everybody is spending money to buy these batteries. So we need an IDC that can say, we are taking a risk on this youth. We'll fund you, notwithstanding the fact that you don't have an offtake, because we know there's a demand out there. So that's what we're talking about when we say we need our government to take the risk on our youth. Number two is the issue of energy security. President, we've had a number of engagements with yourself. We do have solutions. And I like the posture that government is now taking, especially when I listen to Minister Mantashe. We have to fix the assets that we have. We've got power stations that are there. Let's fix those and make sure that we are able to supply the energy for this economy, because our economy is underperforming because of lack of energy. I cannot tell you the stats in terms of companies that have failed as a result of lack of energy. If you are running a small business, you cannot afford to close for 6 or 8 hours on a daily basis. You can't afford that. And yet you are still expected to pay your employees the full salary come the end of the month. So we are hurting. The solutions that we have in terms of fixing our current fleet of coal-fired power stations must be implemented with speed, President, so that we can be able to supply electricity to the economy. Of course, renewables have a place, but renewables are not going to resolve the problem of base load. Now, even when you look at the issue of households as far as energy security is concerned, we were very concerned looking at the speech of the Minister of Finance when you look at the incentives that were given to the households. And the incentive that was given to the household was based on a tax rebate. Now, I want to ask, how many households in the townships and the rural areas are going to benefit from that? This is a measure that will mostly benefit middle class. So again, we'll go back and re-engage in terms of how do we make sure that we are as inclusive as possible when we are providing these solutions. And also the SMMEs that are there must be assisted so that they can cushion themselves against this issue of energy poverty that we have as far as our SMME sector is concerned. Lastly, Program Director, the issue of crime. We are having a serious issue of crime, especially that impacts our businesses, SMMEs, and also those that are operating in the townships. I come from the construction industry. We all know the problem of gangs that are targeting construction sites so that they can be able to also play economically, but we need to find a solution. I think we have a solution. Let's make sure that the implementation of those solutions is expedited. Thank you very much.
So while I move to Comrade Mike, I want my panelists to keep in mind when we say we have solutions. Now, and I know Comrade Ndu will be facilitating the next session about the future we want. I want us to be as clear, as focused, and we speak what those solutions are, but also what your role is. I don't like bystanders, because we only just project. I want us to be then talking about what are we doing to actually be part of that solution we're talking about. But I know my panelists will go into that area. Comrade Mike.
No, thanks, Comrade Steve. And, allow me to throw the President ANC protocols. The solutions we will propose are not new. It's not something that we have not ventilated before. But we welcome, firstly, the initiative of engaging civil society. We will take the topic and each heading. When we say a safe community, we suppose that we mean a community that is safe from crime, that is safe from hunger, that is safe from diseases. That is why we want to add health in this component of our solutions. That when we take safety of the community, we do think that we need to go back to our tradition of strengthening community policing forums. And because we're the ANC and we're in an ANC platform, we have had a tradition of street committees. It will help if we would collaborate with civic movements to ensure that street committees are revived, but strengthen and resource and capacitate community policing forums will be one of the solutions, which is not new, but which we have to return to. But it is also a fact that our law enforcement institutions like police stations themselves are facing challenges. I'm sure we know that when criminals are running out of ammunition, they go to police station to rob them to get guns. What it means is that it means the police station itself or the policemen and women themselves are also vulnerable to crime. What it means is that we also need to defend and protect the police stations, resource them, human resource-wise and also infrastructure-wise, equipment-wise, roadworthy vehicles, and enough vehicles to respond to the calls of our community, particularly in rural areas. We know that there are areas that are not accessible because of the road conditions of our communities where police can't even respond on time. It means we have to look into the roads networks in our communities. With regard to gender-based violence, we want to applaud the South African government for finally ratifying Convention 190 that eliminate gender-based violence and sexual harassment in the workplace. But we think as we domesticate that convention, we need to move further and insist that our police stations are equipped with a unit that is fit for that particular function of dealing with the victims of gender-based violence. Trained in a more specific way, but also safe place for the victims to be free to relate their story so that we can investigate and prosecute. In a workplace, we thought it should be law, now that we have rectified that convention, that there must be units in the workplace. Our mothers and sisters are dying in the workplace, are being victimized, they disappear for weeks without knowing where they are. There's no unit that specializes with looking at those signs of an abused colleague in a workplace. We think we need to institute those kinds of units there in our workplaces, as taking forward the Convention 190. I wanted to add health. Clinics can't operate 24 hours in our communities because not enough staff, despite the fact that we've got nurses that are unemployed in our country. Clinics can't operate 24 hours because there's no safety for those nurses that work there. Themselves get attacked, they get raped. It means that healthcare workers need to be protected in the workplace, particularly at night. But also, they need to be sufficiently staffed because patients die in their hands. They can't do anything because first, there's not enough resources. Second, there are not enough workers to help our patients. But also there are clinics that are inaccessible. Ambulances can't get to areas where our people are needing to be fetched in order. And in fact, there are even not enough and well-equipped ambulances that paramedics can be able to resuscitate patients inside the ambulance. It's one thing to have an ambulance that's going to catch a badly injured patient. It's another thing for the ambulance to be equipped to resuscitate a patient. This is one matter that we think it needs to be looked at. We have got a battalion that is performing healthcare services that are not employed by the Department of Health, the community healthcare workers. They roam household from household, administering medication to our elderly, to our TB patients, to our HIV patients, and doing all those of things. But they are walking barefoot, they are not employed by the Department of Health, but they are performing public health care services. We don't think that is a normal society that we should live in. And of course, there's accessibility of education.
And the last point.
And lastly, yes, last point. Collectively, we can do this thing. We are coming from a tradition of collaborative. And President, collective partnership meets also institutions that have been developed. So, Comrade Tulane, I'll be selfish if are not sectarian. That the collective bargaining in the country is supposed to do economic development, social justice, and sound labor relations in the workplace. When we walk away from such as a movement, we are walking away into chaos and anarchy out there because we are abandoning the rules of engagement. The workers, they have always seen the ANC as their shield that will defend them whenever attacks comes to them. It is a fact that we need to rebuild that shield because it is if it has not already collapsed and workers are left vulnerable and exposed. They need the ANC to shield them. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Let's move quickly to our next speaker. Cool.
Thank you very much, Director of Proceedings. In the true sense, Comrade Tulane, I will say in conclusion to what you have said. It's quite important to emphasize that civil society remains a key actor in implementing of the Sustainable Development Goals, as well as in responses and recovery strategies of the country. As we emerge from the difficult times of the COVID-19 pandemic, certainly all of us as a country, we've got good lessons that we've learned about the importance and the critical role that the civil society plays. Even during the times of public health threats, the civil society remains a readily available attachment to play a role and cover the ground. Yet, it is a reality that the civil society faces ever-growing challenges, such as shrinking civic space in some spaces, and on how we respond to other challenges, the pandemics like HIV and AIDS, and health issues in general. One of the areas of concern is areas of collaboration and partnership and setting of an agenda. At all times, there is a critical question that we need to ponder on as to who sets the agenda and sets for who. Aid providers, it's important that they continue to enhance their support to the civil society to address efficiencies and the effectiveness in the gaps and enable the members of the civil society to strengthen their accountability mechanism. But one major area of concern, Comrade President, is the bilateral agreements that as a country we enter into with some of the aid providers. Because many a times if not always. When they come, they dangle a carrot that they come with good intent to enhance and support the civil society. But the biggest question is the civil society, are they acclimatized with the contents of those bilateral agreements that we sign as government? And do we look at the implications on how those bilateral agreements end up destabilizing the civil society? I think there are very typical examples, and that some would agree with me when I say there is a growing perception that sustainability of relations, it's lacking in the civil society. But do we ponder politically as to who has set that agenda of destabilizing our civil society? And who benefits out of that? Just retrieving from the memory that the ANC as a leader of the society, I take this session as a revival session because, Comrade Steve, this is not something new. This is something that the ANC has been doing prior 1994. But I think we have got limitation of not sustaining the good initiatives. I was looking around, Comrade President, just looking around to think to say, the ANC has led a process that brought about the National Health Plan through the Patriotic Health Front, which was a front that brought various stakeholders in the space of social and health at the time. And that was a nuclear resource of professionals. And I was really wondering that we have got similar nuclear of human resource that we invested on as a country in the field of engineering. But do we ever consider having similar initiatives that we have had during those times and sustain those? Obviously, all this will require a transformational agenda where we also ensure that civil society is realized as change agents and prosperity for all. When we talk of job creation and creation of opportunities, many a times we forget that those CBOs that are based in the civil society, they also create job opportunities, employment opportunities, where at the end of the day, families, they have something on the table. I thank you.
Thank you so much. I move to my next speaker. And I want us to note this, President, the register of NPO and NPC, we have just up to 400,000 civil society organizations registered. And in fact, when you then qualify it and you look at the numbers, how many jobs have been created in that space? And how do we actually look at return on investment in a way that works for the country? I think it's quite an important point there. My next speaker is Setswana. It is not by any make I started with men. It looks like my flow of the panel, but I'm glad that now women are speaking. Over to you.
All protocol observed, and thank you very much, Comrade Steve. As the South African Youth Council, one of our affiliates, the ANC Youth League, which is a league of the ANC, says young people are a strata in transition. And obviously, they transition to society through education. But it's very much unfortunate that we have an education system containing a curriculum which is obviously not assisting many of our young people to can participate actively in the economy of South Africa. It shows that, our GDP shows that as South Africa, we are not doing so good, yet we are very rich in minerals that we export to other countries. And they come back to us as the products that we would have to buy when we could be capacitating ourselves to can produce and manufacture. And that will obviously translate to even young people participating actively in the economy of South Africa. There's also one thing that we would love to raise, that the curriculum, which is contained of the racial stereotypes, which makes many of our African children believe that they are indeed inferior than the other race. So we also need to, as civil society, venture into that and see how do we then resolve such challenges. And it starts even with us as parents in the households, that we instill a certain way of doing things to our kids, because ultimately, like we said, they are a strata in transition, which is going to build a society living with so many of these shortcomings and challenges. The other thing that we would love to raise as the South African Youth Council is that of gender-based violence. We believe that all of us are enablers of gender-based violence, because we are next door neighbors with abusers, yet we do not report such cases. You go to your workplace, you see a woman with bruises, week in, week out, you are least bothered. What are we saying as society? How is it that we are not reporting, or at least extend ourselves, irrespective of the abusers? Obviously, there's that thing that the more they are abused, the more they get comfortable. But it is our space as the society to tap in and report such challenges of gender-based violence. And on that very same breath, Comrade President, I would also like to raise an issue which has been trending on social media, which obviously some of the people were even calling for axing of the Minister of Police. There's a Mtwa lady from the Eastern Cape. She trended last year. Our own minister of the ANC-led government went to that household. So far, the murderer is not arrested. And it's a pity that the sibling of the very same lady is asking questions and saying, the murderer is associated to the ANC. And obviously, as the ANC, that's not something that we can keep quiet about. We call upon for intervention on such issues. The other issue that we would love to raise on the economy, the local economic development, especially at the level of municipalities, a sphere of government which is very, very close to the people. Whenever people have challenges, the first door that they knock on is that of the local sphere of government. I don't know if the DDM is going to address the challenge of the uncoordinated approaches of government, ANC-led government, where you'd find out that the provincial government, the national government, they bring to us programs without even involving the municipalities first. If we need as a society in a particular municipalities such programs, they just come and ultimately they are not beneficial. We need to work closely with the local government sphere such that we prioritize the needs of the people within a particular society and address them accordingly. Thank you very much, Comrade Steve.
Thank you so much. Let's move to you, Comrade Kolelo.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to the President and the entire leadership of the ANC for allowing for this opportunity to take place, especially in terms of civil society. I am not speaking in my personal capacity, but as a researcher from an organization that is part of civil society, a research institute, Mapungupo Institute, and we've been bothered by the erosion of civil society for some time now and partnered with Kagiso Trust in terms of unpacking, these challenges by civil society. And unlike my fellow panelists, who concluded, I will start from the beginning by first considering the historical context of civil society in South Africa. We all know the role that civil society played during the struggle against apartheid. We also know about the collaboration between the ANC and civil society, which led to the emergence of the United Democratic Front. But also what happened there is that we found that civil society was a crucial contributor. And also another thing that we have to understand through that historical analysis all the way to the present moment is that civil society is not homogeneous. Civil society is very diverse and plural. So as we engage with civil society, that has to be understood because civil society is driven by various policy agendas, it is driven by various priorities, but also there's different views in terms of what is to be regarded as the most important issue in society. So there are a variety of categories and types, others are CBOs, NPOs, and so on. But what is important is that civil society or the entire sector has been able to converge in several areas, and those had to do with social justice, service delivery, ensuring that there's good governance, anti-corruption, taking up issues of safety and security in communities. And the modalities for that action have been really through advocacy, but also litigation, which has been quite a challenge, but mostly what is more endemic has been through protests, and at times violent protests. And now why is there this increase in violent protests in our country? We've got a constitution that enables, it's a constitutional right to be able to go out and protest. But at the same time, there's a deep frustration in society regarding the provision of even the most basic services like health, water, electricity, and so on. So what is the role of civil society in this regard? Civil society has been quite critical in terms of social dialogue. And we do know that when it comes to social compacting, as indicated by my colleague from NEDLEC there, and the President also likes to speak about social compacting, but dialogue is a critical ingredient in ensuring that there is a compact that is ultimately forged, and that engagement has to be meaningful, considering the diversity, the plurality, the diverse and sometimes conflicting priorities that the sector has. And yes, there is NEDLEC that was formed as a result of our negotiated settlement, and it was established through an act of law, the NEDLEC Act of 1994. And it has been instrumental in negotiating, and also what is quite interesting for our setup in South Africa is that NEDLEC also includes community sector, or civil society. However, there's this question whether there is space for social dialogue at the NEDLEC. And also what we've found is that there's been other platforms for compact-like engagements that have happened outside of the NEDLEC platform, like the Vision 2030. We've seen activities by the Department of Sports, Arts and Culture speaking to compacting. The President also has led various summits, whether it's Job Summit or Investment Summit, or the Summit on Gender-Based Violence. But these summits, sometimes we found that they have not been very successful. And this can be said, it is a result of several reasons. There's been a lack of nuance, but also they have not been representative of broader society. So you find that representation is very, very limited, but also there's been this poor coordination and facilitation of the various stakeholders. And so, if we were to contextualize the social compact, if it were to take place, or if the ANC, through the president, were to lead a compact in society, we have to understand that legitimacy is critical. So without legitimacy, you can never forge a compact. And aspects of that require you understanding the expectations of society, understanding the capacity of the state also to undertake these things. But another critical factor that we always forget, and I think my colleague from business here, is that we also have another ingredient will be to have an elite that can provide direct resources. So we need a more activist approach by business. But then when it comes to priorities, we found that we have this challenge of these endless lists of priorities. Even Kagiso Trust, in our process, we found that there was a long list of priorities stemming from the fight against unemployment, gender-based violence, basic income grant. You look at the community sector at the NEDLEC, they also have their long list of priorities, and supporting the police and so on. But that is the main problem, that there needs to be more focus in our prioritization. Other colleagues from civil society have said the list is so long because these issues have been ignored for so long and they just keep piling up. But also for proper planning, there has to be some kind of prioritization where we know we identify 3 or 4 priorities for immediate implementation and galvanize society. But what is important is that civil society also needs to be coordinated, because at the moment it's not. So for government to enter into these compacts with civil society, that would be very important. Maybe considering imitating what labor and business does through federations, or civil society can continue with this loose arrangement, but making sure that those who are not included are also brought into the party. For example, what do we do about the informal economy? So I'll leave it there for now. Thank you very much, Jane.
Thank you so much for the points. Let me move to my last speaker, Advocate Tando.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for the invitation. Thank you so much, Mr. President. I too wish to start at the beginning. And as someone who teaches on transformation, I think it's always important for us to ground ourselves in the concepts and the words that we are using. So my first is to say that gender-based violence is a largely misunderstood conception. Gender-based violence is the unfair discrimination, the creation of privileges and harmful biases based solely on the premise of sex, gender, and sexual orientation. Now, South Africa is a very unique society that we find ourselves in because of our colonial and advanced colonial history in the form of apartheid. Now, we've made a gargantuan mistakes, which is that we thought that colonization and apartheid were purely about race discrimination. And the reality is that it was not. It was not merely about race and economic disempowerment of black people. It was, in fact, also about gender. Gender was just as important as racial discrimination in our society at that time. And that is why we continue to feel the impact of that type of discrimination. And so our biggest project now, Mr. President, and to everyone else in the room, is for us to prioritize the gender project. But I want to be very specific about this. Now, colonization and apartheid were very psychological and incredibly strategic. The architects understood that the most important thing that they had to do in order to dismember and to disempower black communities was to disempower black women. Black women are incredibly important in our society. And it has been incredibly strategic for us to be convinced that we are valueless and that we are worthless, that our labor is not worth much, that our intellectual property is not worth much, that we ought to be subjugated in our own homes. And so when I say that we must empower, I'm being very specific in saying, Mr. President, that our new project and your new assignment for the new vanguard is to undo historical misogynoir, but also to understand that black women are not a homogeneous group. We have LGBTQIA+, we have got youth and children, we have got persons with disabilities, we have got those who continue to live in the rural areas, in underdeveloped communities. And so as we think about how we are going to develop black women, youth, and children, we must be very considerate of those groups. If we fail any of those groups, we have failed the development project in its entirety. The reason why our country is stagnating and in many instances is regressing is because we made the mistake of forgetting the black women. And it is now time that we begin to center the black women, but also underpinning and understanding the various identities that surround black women, children, and youth. Now, to corroborate my statements insofar as this is concerned, I want to share a very scary statistic with you. 19.4% of all businesses in South Africa are female-founded and owned businesses. 4.5% of those businesses are businesses that have got access to venture capital. But only 0.2% of black female-owned businesses get access to venture capital funding to start their businesses. In this country, if you're a black woman, you are systemically locked out of the economy in different ways. It isn't legislated like before. Before, black women were not allowed to own land in their names. It was legislated for. Before, a black woman could not see themselves becoming anything other than a domestic worker, a nurse, or a teacher. But now, there is a silent violence that happens, where yes, a woman can go and study to become an engineer, but the likelihood of that woman getting a job as an engineer is minimal. And the likelihood of that black woman being paid the same amount as her counterpart in the workplace is minimal. I want to give the ANC the task of auditing the status quo of black women socially, economically, and politically. And the sad thing is that while I've laid the land of our historical context, the fact remains is that our situation has not changed much in our society. And we find little ways for us to exercise microaggressions. For example, if you're a young black female, you don't have chances of holding executive leadership positions. If you're a queer person, other black women are violent towards you. I want to give and share this very clear assignment as I wrap up, Steve. Mr. President, distinguished guests, I would like us to start with holding the private sector accountable for the incidences of gender-based violence in our society. If you remember, Mr. President, in 2019, we marched to the Johannesburg Stock Exchange to ask for the 2% tax levy. Mr. President, I ask you to exercise the courage to call big business into one room and to tell them that they will be accountable. Because some of the biggest incidences of violence happen in the corporate world. I also want to challenge the ANC to give an opportunity for black women to hold the highest positions of authority within this organization. Mr. President, I'm one of your new commissioners, as Steve has mentioned, at the Commission for Gender Equality. And I'm so excited to have this job. You're right, Mr. President, because we've got a very big job ahead of us. But I want to say that I'm saddened by the fact that of all the Chapter 9 institutions, we have the least budget. And our commissioners are also the least paid. We have a small capacity to execute a gargantuan task. Mr. President, you have the power to increase our budget. And you have the, yes, you have the power to increase our capacity. I want to ask for us to lobby and to execute adequate gender budgeting, monitoring, and evaluation in our lifetime.
Thank you.
As I wrap up, Mr. President, I ask that because the Department of Women, Youth, and Persons with Disabilities sits in the Office of the Presidency, I would like to ask that we please get the authority from that department to establish the 7th pillar of the National Strategic Plan on Gender-Based Violence and Femicide that will focus on children. The issues of children are completely unique. And when you find the people that are going to lead that pillar, the person cannot be older than 40 years old, because no one over the age of 40 understands the unique experiences of the young millennials, the Generation Z, and the Alpha generation. Let us focus, Steve, on the Black women economic empowerment agenda. And Mr. President, I want to say, I'm not talking about the BEE Black, I'm talking about the original Black women. We must prioritize and center the economic empowerment of Black women in our lifetime. If we liberate Black women, diverse, intersectional Black women identities, I guarantee you, Mr. President, I guarantee you that we would have liberated not only this country, but the entire African continent. Thank you.
Thank you. Let's give another round of applause to the entire panel. We can hear the panelists are speaking passionately. And I don't want us to exhaust so much, because Comrade Ndu will be coming after this session to ask and speak about the future we want. Now, panelists have instigated ideas, has given us thought-provoking points that we need to nudge on, think about, and we have here our officials, we also have our office bearers, we have the NEC members who are listening carefully. Because when NEC discussed the priorities to saying we are challenged as a country, but we have partners, we can't resolve this on our own. We have to go back and do a just approach in resolving developmental issues. Now, President committed with his leadership, let's go listen and do people's work. And that's why we are here. We've been doing it, but now we want to do it better. And we want to do it with you. And that's the most important thing we work with here. Now, I only have few minutes that was given to me. Remember, the next session, there aren't panelists, but Comrade Ndu is going to be facilitating a much more broader engagement. So I'm going to ask that I only have about 3 hands with clear question or comment. You have 60 seconds. 60 seconds to make that comment. But I will do random selection. And then I will start this end first. So I'll do 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. So please, if I don't take your hand, my colleague and comrade here will be doing that. So I'm going to take a hand in that table. Comrade Phoebe, that hand of Mama, yes, there, that one. That's one. Number 2, I'm going to take this hand here. Excellent. There's somebody waiting behind you there. That's the hand that I'm taking. Number 3, I'll take yourself here, and then I'll take this last hand. Now, those are the only 4 hands. The sessions will be back again later. Yes, Comrade Phoebe.
Good morning to everyone, to our president, the leadership of the ANC, and everyone that is here. My name is Luyolo Tandani from PE, Ekabeja. Thank you to all the panelists